Hello YouTube, Robin Hood Bricks here, and one of the most asked for things in the history of the entire channel has been a steam train to add to our train selection in Brick Nottingham, so I've finally given in, and that's what we're going to make a start on today. Now, the reason I haven't built a steam train in Brick Nottingham to date is just because I know absolutely nothing technical about trains, and that knowledge gets even more thin when we get to steam trains themselves. I mean, I know you shovel coal in one end to make water into steam that kind of pushes around all the gubbins and makes the pistons on the outside turn the wheels, but that is about it. So for this build, I'm using the expert advice of Railroad Jim, again, who helped us with the shunter build last time we did a train. But generally speaking, I've got absolutely no frame of reference, so you'll have to forgive all of the obvious mistakes I'm probably going to make throughout these videos. But the first place I started was kind of with the idea of building a really accurate, good-looking, massive train like the Emerald Knight, set 10194. But that build, along with a lot of the other more recent steam train builds, is just too wide for my city. I've set it all up with basically the 6-wide train builds in mind, so a big build like that just wouldn't get through my tunnels underneath Brick Nottingham Castle. They wouldn't get over the bridges, wouldn't get through all of those monorail supports that hold up the monorail line against the wall and so on. And even my station platforms are exactly 8 studs apart to make the gaps a lot slimmer. And as a result, all those trains would either hit or scrape their way all the way through. So I can't get one of those sets as my starting point. And even if I did, I wouldn't really have the confidence to make it any different because of that lack of knowledge. So another way I could get a really super accurate rendition of a train is to copy off one of the people who know far more than me about trains and do an amazing job on their channels of making very sort of accurate renditions of historic trains or, you know, famous ones of the past. But I really don't want to just copy their ideas, you know, without making any changes at all. And if I did make changes, I just think it would be really lame and I'd probably get complaints from all of you who know much more about things than I do. So that avenue was not going to work for me. So instead, I thought I'd do what I usually do and reminisce by going back to the Lego catalogue in search of Lego nostalgia. Now, obviously, steam trains are old. Very old in the majority. They don't tend to make them anymore, I don't think at all. Maybe they make a few. But what I thought might be a really fun idea was to use a really, really old Lego set to represent a really, really old Lego train. And in that way, I could use a set like 133 Locomotive from 1975, with the yellow drive rods, which are very cool on the sides there, to be a really blocky old school train going around my city. And that could be quite fun, you know, a real contrast to the more modern sets. And then I could either add some sort of blocky old school wagons for more cargo, or some really blocky old school carriages indeed, just to be on the back of it. And I could motorise it and all the rest of it, but I don't know, I just thought it was a bit too old-fashioned, maybe a bit too blocky to be used as a source, and I couldn't really add much to it without making it ultra-modern and just look kind of weird. So I scratched that plan and kind of looked into the next generation of trains, which was pretty much 9-volt era, and I looked around 2001, 2002 at the My Own Train range. Now, this was a fantastic range where they sold a myriad of train elements individually, so you could kind of mix and match them as you saw fit and make your own train. An absolutely great concept that they really should bring back. So you could buy passenger cars on their own, either in blue or in green, and make a combination of the two if you wanted, or get multiples of one and make your own passenger train. Or you could get cargo hoppers and make an absolutely long train with loads of those, or have loads of tankers, or open wagons, or any combo of the above. And then why not add a caboose onto the end? And it didn't even stop there as well. With the locomotives, you could get a small locomotive, with the set 3740, which you could actually build in two different formats. So you could have kind of the doors on the side or the doors on the back. And if you wanted a bigger locomotive, you could get set 3740, again, built two different ways. But then you're going to need a tender, aren't you? Okay, so get that as well on its own, set 3742. And you could really combine all of these and make your own bespoke train that really was unique to you. I really wish Lego would do this now, so we could buy different cargo combos that we wanted in multiples as well, without having to buy huge sets that are quite expensive and getting a lot of repetition. But then they went even further from that in the My Own Train range, because if you didn't want your locomotive being blue, for example, then they'd actually sell separately all the bricks you would need to change the blue out to make it green, or the black bricks to make it black, or the brown bricks to make it brown, or grey bricks to make it grey. So you really could tailor My Own Train and have it looking absolutely fantastic for your personal needs. And then, of course, finally, you could add a motor and a light to the front and make a fantastic setup. So this range really got my attention with these really beautiful looking trains decorated with lovely stickers. I just thought it was absolutely perfect. So I thought I would make my own train kind of based on those sets, but maybe brought into the current era with a few more modern pieces and powered with power functions, because that's pretty much my weapon of choice when it comes to motorization, as you know, and I can use my remote controls and all the rest of it while I'm filming. So the first thing I bought was actually one of the lights, which is going to be the light on the front of the train. And then I bought the kind of really cool reflector, which makes it a lot more powerful, which you can just slot on the front. And I thought, well, let's see if this works well as the starting point for my own train. Ooh, wrong way. There we go. And the good thing is this is backwards compatible with power functions, so I can actually use that like that, and you can see how bright it is when it's using that reflector, that very simple bulb. So I wanted to build my own train, make it very old-fashioned, but have it going around my modern Lego city. So let's look at how I'm going to do the setup. Now, before we start actually building anything here with bricks, I do think we need to spend a bit of time thinking about the setup, because we've actually got quite a lot of electrical equipment to hide in this build. And the main constituent part at the front, the locomotive, is very narrow indeed, in that it's only on a 6-wide base, and the kind of front engine with the boiler bit in and so on, all of the gubbins that I don't understand, is actually only 4 studs wide. So there's no real space in that area to hide much of this equipment at all. And indeed, on the back of the locomotive itself, the cabin is very open, and I want it to be open because we want to be able to see Railroad Jim shoveling coal in there and all the rest of it. So there's not much space to hide any of this stuff at all. So really, all of it needs to be hidden in probably the first carriage, and indeed the tender, which will be containing all of the coal. So we've got a bit of space to work with. So what have we got to hide? Well, first of all, we've got the battery box, which is quite chunky and difficult to hide. Then we're going to have an IR receiver, just so I can control it in the same way as all my other trains, and that's quite important to me, even though other people will want to use powered up or something like that. Then, of course, we've got the motor, which will go on there and be kind of underneath one of the elements of our train. And then, of course, I want to have my light, which we just looked at, which will be going kind of in parallel. So as soon as you turn on the motor, or rather the battery box rather, the light will always be on, regardless of whether the motor is actually moving or not. So it'll be on in the station and stuff like that, and then this can drive the actual motion. So that's how I kind of want it to be. Now, I don't think we've got space for this, or this, or this in the locomotive itself. So I think the only thing that will be actually in the very front part of the train will be the light shining off the front. So we have to hide all of these 3 elements either in the tender or in the first carriage. So I think this clearly needs to go in the carriage just because it's so big, but I'm kind of thinking that I'll be able to get both of these in the coal tender. So it will be a very sort of short build, probably about exactly the same length as the motor itself, and it'll have 4 wheels, 2 on each side, and then it'll have straight sides up, and this will just be peeking out of the top, and then we'll kind of have fake coal all sort of on this slope here, and I'm hoping that'll look very good. So given that I've been gabbling on, as usual, talking so much already, I think if we're going to do any element today, it probably has to be this one, the middle section, just because A, it's most complicated, and if we can't squeeze both of these into it, then it'll very much affect the design of one of the other two, and also because it's the smallest for the time available today. That doesn't necessarily mean it will be the quickest though. Anyway, so basically I'm going to get rid of the battery box for now, and I'm going to keep the motor, and I'm going to keep the IR receiver because they are going to be the focus of what we need to squeeze into our build. Cool. On to the tender build itself then. So here is our motor with 4 wheels attached. So far so simple. And the biggest problem with building something directly onto a motor like this is you haven't got very many studs to play with. There's kind of a 2x4 section at the front there and at the back, and we've got one kind of Technic half pin sticking out of the top, which is usually what it pivots around on when it's on a bigger train build. Now we won't need that to pivot here because it's just got these 4 wheels, so everything can be firmly attached to the top, but still it's not much to work with. And what's more, when we add a buffer onto each end, so it can kind of attach to its neighbours, and we've added these decorative side bits, which I think definitely make it look a lot better. And you get those usually with most train sets of the last sort of couple of decades. Then, well, we've just removed, helpfully, the 2x4 section on each end and replaced it with a nice shiny bit that we can't connect to. So now we've actually only got 2 studs on these decorative bits and that half Technic pin to connect to at all. So yeah, whatever we build is going to have to be quite careful not to be very sort of unstable. Now this is a build that I did actually before on my subway train, a sort of similar thing, a way of connecting to these very few connection points to make a train, but this one's probably even worse in that it's actually a lot shorter. There we actually had a 3rd set of wheels. So I will start by basically increasing the number of studs we've got on the sides by putting some plates in here. But before I do that, I really have to decide what colour I'm going to make my own train. Because we aren't limited to the old choice of green, blue, black, brown and grey that we had back in the day. Now I could use dark green and go for a kind of emerald night vibe. I could even use dark blue for a sapphire equivalent, or a dark red as a kind of ruby equivalent of the emerald night, ruby night. Or I could use a really bright colour like red or yellow or something like that. And I can hear a few of you wincing at the idea of a bright red train. But, you know, the Hogwarts Express is bright red, isn't it? But it'll probably look too similar to that. Anyway, what I decided on was a real classic in my mind, and it was one of the original colours, and that is, yep, black, which makes it very hard to video and to show up well, but nonetheless, I think it will look all the better by the end of things, because it will be just a really classic look. So what I've done here is added a 1x4 and then a 1x6 plates on the side, just to bring it up to the same level as the top of the motor there and to give us a bit more to connect onto. Unfortunately, these are very well held, so it is quite stable. Then I'm going to add a lot more plates to kind of fill in these ends and link up with the studs we have got. So I'm going to use some very modern plates, 3x3 ones, joined together with some other plates here, a 1x6 and a 2x6, to kind of make an end. And I'm having to bend this wire quite sort of firmly back on itself so it comes into this space in the middle. And I've added some 1x2 plates as well, so the areas here are not hollow. And then I can kind of join all of this section onto that half Technic pin using a 2x4 Technic plate. So I'm just going to have that going on there and connecting onto those just to give it a bit more support. And so far this is still quite rickety, but it will get stronger as we go and we build the walls of the tender to hold it all together and give it a bit more strength. And in due course I will be adding the same sort of 3x3 ends onto this side, but we really haven't got any bricks to hold them on at the moment, but it will be kind of like that. So that is our incredibly rickety first layer, but the most important bit is we've got our cable coming out of the middle. So now we can add more of the electric gubbins by way of the infrared receiver. Now this build gets only more complicated as it goes on and more fiddly, so I may well be catapulting pieces across the room and using bad language, hopefully not. But the next part is to actually add the cable that's going to be linking our power source in the first carriage, which will be kind of this end, represented here by this, through the entire body of this build. And it's kind of going to go in that cavity, the cable, between the 1x6s here. And I can actually use that sort of end bit, if you will, to kind of start holding together this end of the build as well. And this is what's probably going to cause me a lot of issue and kind of fall apart several times while I'm trying to do it. But essentially I want that to start holding those together there. Then that cable will go through like that, which will ultimately link with that battery box. And then to sandwich that in position, I'm going to add the IR receiver. Right, so that means that this cable from the IR receiver needs to link up with that wire that we just threaded through, and the one from the motor needs to connect to the IR receiver there. And I'm just going to add a 1x2 in a horrible colour just to level that off for a later part of the build. And it's still not held together very firmly. And we've got so many wires now, we're going to have to fold up very carefully so they'll fit in a very confined space. But that is the first part of the kind of electrics done, in that the motor will power always this block, which ultimately the lights that will go through to the locomotive will be linked to, and it will also power the IR block, and then the IR block will then power the motor when it receives the instruction to do so. And that's the only way of having a hardwired on light and having all of this stuff in this space. So yeah, very difficult and very wonky so far. So what we need to do now is a couple of things. One, use a couple of inverted slopes just to start the outside wall to kind of hold that wire that's going to be going between the carriages in. And next we need to build the starts of the outside walls that are going to hold all of these wobbly pieces together. Okay, so the next fiddly bit that's probably going to all fall apart in my hands and drive me mad is to build the side walls that will hold all these rickety parts together. And I'm taking a very heavy influence from those original My Own Train sets, and I'm going to have these modified bricks with the bar on as kind of grab rails. I'm going to use the very old sort of ladder modified plates to sort of add a lot of texture on the outside. I'm also going to have these 1x4x3 panels just so they can take a really pretty sticker in due course from the original set, because I think that will look really great, because I think that was a real highlight of those sets, was the beautiful sort of traditional looking stickers that they had. And then we can do the next section with some bricks, and this is where it's all going to fall apart, so I'll be very gentle, and one of those tall slopes as well. So that's kind of our profile for the side, and it's all black, but it's all shiny and nice, and as I say, the stickers will decorate it in due course, and it's still relatively rickety. I won't demonstrate exactly how rickety, because then I'll have to do it all again. But it will get held even more as we add each layer on top. So here we're just doing the same combination of bricks very carefully on the other side, and that will be like that. So I'm hoping that when we've got the next layer on, the fact that there'll be an infrared receiver in here will be completely hidden, and just a black dome will be visible, but it will obviously tie in with the rest of the black elements of the build. Cool. Okay, so onto the back, and I've got a slightly smaller panel to go in that gap just have that recessed area, so it's got a bit of similarity to the sides. And then it seems that they have a lot of red lights on the back of these things, so I thought I'd add a pair of those. I don't know if they're exactly in the right place, or if they're just called tail lights or rear lights or whatever it might be. And then I need to start coming in a bit, so I'm going to add a sloped layer next around the top. So that's going to start bringing it in to conceal this thing here, but then I'm going to have to focus on the front and the sides. Now this thing should contain coal, and therefore to hide all of this electric nonsense, which I've tried to really neatly fold all of these wires, one concertina ring around one side of this block and one around the other side, just so it can all fit, so I can actually fill this with coal, and it won't be loose. It will just be kind of a lump of it that will look like it's loose. Now, the unfortunate thing is that real coal is black, and if I have black coal on black sides and all the rest of it, it'll just look black on black and you won't really be able to see it. So I'm going to use a bit of artistic license in a way and have dark grey coal. Some people probably won't like that, but I think on black it's the only way you're going to even see it. So basically I've just made a coal surface very roughly using a combination of different plates and round plates and so on, just so I can basically kind of make a roof, if you will, on this section that's going to be the same height as our wall so far, and therefore it's going to look like it's very full of coal. Then I can basically build a side to kind of hold the whole thing together. Now I'll just do one of the sides to start with some 2 wide plates. I'm going to have a corner plate there to hold that on, and then I can put some slopes, kind of pinning everything together. And I'm doing this all very carefully so I don't sort of catapult the whole build across my desk, with some of those kind of 2-sided corner type ones there. And then I've got some of these in black as well, and these are nice smooth slopes but with the back bit taken out, so it can go kind of onto the shoulder of the IR receiver, and then with another sort of concave corner type slope and another one of those, I can fill in that last gap, and therefore we've only really got the dome sticking out of the top. And when we look in the top as well, we can see all of the coal. So I quite like that. So here is the same setup for the other side. And I'll just have to do that even more carefully since it's in one big block, that I don't break everything we've done so far. Oh. And for the first time now, everything is held together. I'll just put on the corner one as well. And it has actually now gained some strength. So I can sort of bash it, move it around, hit it on the desk, and it all does still work. So that is good. So we've actually gained that strength finally by having all of these layers on. So we've got this tail, which will link up with the power supply that will be in the first carriage. And then we've got our IR receiver and motor all very well concealed within this tender unit. Now, we can see all the coal there on the roof, and that kind of blends in with the grey front of that IR receiver very well. And we've got the ability to add on what will be another cable to link up to our locomotive at the front, and that will kind of go in like that. So we need a front that lets out a wire, just like we've made the back let out a wire as well. But we also kind of need a sort of slope of coal that's being shoveled by Railroad Jim into the locomotive itself. So for that, what I've used is this setup, and it's just a few modified plates, these ones with the bar on, and some of these kind of flag pieces, I think of them as, but they're actually modified tiles in the catalogue, done upside down, so I can attach some more sort of loose coal pieces onto the front of it. And then basically, though I may have to stop the video just to get this on because of all those wires, I'm going to shove that into that position, and basically it will create the front slope of that kind of coal supply, and it will look like that. So yeah, let me just stop the video for a moment and I'll manhandle those wires out of the way. Yeah, so I probably built this in the wrong order. If I attach that to the underside of the coal slope, then you can see that it works very well like that, and then you can kind of build the sides back around it to hold it all in place. And I've done it this way just because it's a nice sort of diagonal slope, because coal will kind of roll down there, so it's a bit more within the range of Jim when he's doing his stoking part of his job. But also because a little gap there at the bottom will allow a wire out, and I can kind of lift that up just a little bit if necessary, just to give enough space for that to happen. So that, therefore, is very much my finished tender, and I think it looks rather splendid. It'll look even better when I've got those old school stickers on. I'm going to get a very sort of rare and expensive sheet of those. So unfortunately for the camera's perspective and for your perspective trying to see what I'm doing, basically today I've made a big black blob with wires coming out of it and kind of a grey coal surface there. But hopefully you can start to see the sort of full potential of what this whole build's going to look like when it's got a engine of a similar sort of shape on the front here and some really fancy wagons out the back. Though don't hold your breath on those, because I haven't even started getting the pieces for them yet. So I'm afraid that's all I've got time for today, doing that. The next bit clearly is the locomotive itself, and that will take a lot more time and be a lot more fancy. And then we can get the stickers on the whole caboodle as well. But I do think this is a really nice start, because we've managed to cram an absolute load of electric kit into a very small space indeed. I mean, we've got an extension cable, the IR receiver, the motor, all folded into this space with access for a further cable to go out and light that front locomotive as well. So yeah, very technical build indeed. And I think the coal slope looks really good. Looks like it's absolutely full of fuel for a nice long journey. So yeah, so this is what I'll be doing next time when we come back to do a city update. You'll have to let me know if you want to have a Fairground Friday before we do the second part of this, or if I do this on Friday, but we'll do a haul as usual on Wednesday. So as always, thank you very much for watching. It is appreciated. Do remember to like, comment and subscribe for more awesome LEGO videos. And if you value this channel, there are many ways in which you can support it. Do check out the links in the description below. So, until next time, see you! Poop poop!